Rise up, be done, for this day has begun. Stand up, look tall, and we'll climb up that wall. Turn around, turn around. Give me your hand, and we'll fly to another land. Open your eyes and let all your troubles lie. Turn around, turn around. Smiley faces, all kinds of races, not used to seeing such new faces. Feeling strange in my own town, getting dizzy while I turn around. Turning, looking, seeking for a reason why. I know why. I know something you don't know.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us at SoulFood today. We, on this beautiful, sunshiny Sunday, we were extremely excited. Okay, let me back up a little bit. I got a little stoked because I was looking at the Sharpie marker moment, and so pulling it back in. About a month and a half ago, I was walking through, and I looked down at the table, and my friend Ed was sitting there, and I was kind of checking it out, and I was like, what are you doing? Because you've got a Sharpie, and you're going to town, and he started to tell me a little bit about what he does, and being an obviously non-gaming, designing human being, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, and you're talking about sketching, and there was excitement, and a little bit of dancing. And as he was kind of telling me a little bit about what he was doing and bringing it back, being present to sketching, especially when you're developing new games. And I was like, that's the coolest thing, and that's a little bit off the path of what we normally do, and that made me dance even more. And so I was like, Ed, will you come and share with us? And so Ed graciously said yes. And so there was more dancing. And so what I would love to do is, I'm kind of geeking out, and so to pull it together, and I would just like to introduce our friend Ed Byrne to the stage.
Hello. This is very cool, actually. I'm frequently here doing these talks, writing them, and it's fun to actually be here and give it. So this is about level design, which is I just want to go into a little bit about what I'm talking about. Level design is about making the actual kind of experience in a game. Level designers tend to create the worlds or create the experience of running around, shooting people in the face, or solving puzzles, that sort of thing. They are a subset of what we call game designers. They're not programmers or artists necessarily. They are people who sort of facilitate other people's work and combine them into something cohesive, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So hopefully, if you're not into games or you're not in game development, this may resonate with you as an artist or someone who draws. But fundamentally, this talk is about why drawing is good. I may use some terms that are unfamiliar to you, but feel free to ask questions or talk to me about it later, and I will explain as best I can. So this talk was given at GDC this year. This is the Game Developers Conference, where a bunch of game developers come to essentially listen to themselves speak. And I am part of a group of level designers, industry veterans, who get together and write a bunch of loosely related talks and give them throughout the course of a day. It's called Level Design in a Day. And this is the talk I decided to give. Of course, we're at SoulFoods now, SoulFood books, and I wanted to extend my thanks to Sarah for getting me to do this and inviting me here to talk. The title of the talk is "A Picture is Worth 1,024 Words," which is a game development joke. You know, we like power of two numbers, and this is kind of a trope, right? You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We hear that a lot, but actually, when I thought about it, and coming up with the title for this talk, I realized this is sort of a mandate I follow. This is a rule that I believe in. So I often, and you'll see with my slide deck, I should say that as I wrote this talk, I realized I could not use straight up PowerPoint because that would defeat the purpose of saying that people should draw, and so I had to draw everything myself by hand. So I wanted to say that if you don't really comprehend what I'm writing, I apologize. There are no actual fonts in this talk, there's just Sharpie. So I get approached a lot, especially at conferences like GDC, by aspiring level designers who ask, what should I put in my portfolio to get a job? And my inevitable response is, show me your drawings. I want to know how you think. Because that is the most important thing to me. I mean, if you are an aspiring game designer, game developer, and you show me a screenshot or a video, or you show me a game you worked on, I don't know what you did necessarily. I can't tell what part of it is yours or what part of it is someone else's. But if you show me your drawings, if you show me the sketches that you made, if you show me the way that you got to where you ended up in the game, then I can understand your skill level, I can understand your passion, your experience, and I'm sure that you know how to have an idea and then execute it to get to the point where it's in a shipping game. So that's me sitting at that table writing this talk, which is very meta. And I started to think to myself as I wrote this, you know, why is it important? And maybe not everyone does draw or sketch or doodle. Maybe not everyone does think it's important as I do. So I floated this poll on the level design group on LinkedIn, and I basically said, hey, how many of you guys draw on paper before you jump into the editor and start building a game? How many of you work on paper before going digital, essentially? And I was sort of surprised that I wasn't, you know, I was preaching to the choir. Everyone said that they, to some extent, did work on paper. So I realized that my talk was going from a why drawing is good for designers kind of talk to a why good designers draw talk. And I wanted to acknowledge, you know, the designers who do draw, and I wanted, and the people who draw, you know, before they commit to work, and inspire those who don't think that they can draw. And there are a lot of people out there who don't think that they can, and I want to explain why that's not really important. So first off, you know, why do we draw? We're a digital medium, games, you know, we exist on electricity. We can go from nothing to complex worlds in, you know, in a day. We can build cities, continents, we can build, you know, amazing works. And we can do that all in an application like SketchUp or Unreal Ed or Maya. We can do it on the computer. So why do something as obsolete as scratch ink into, you know, vegetable pulp? It turns out there's a lot of reasons. And as I asked myself and as I asked my peers and my friends, you know, why do we do this? A number of things kind of congealed. There's what's called blank canvas syndrome, where a painter looks at a canvas and is struck with the realization that they do not know what to do. We have this, I call it blank editor syndrome, where you sit in front of a computer program and you realize you have to make something, you have no idea how to get started. So drawing on paper actually allows people to kind of have a starting idea, a seed idea from which other ideas follow, and that's the first step you need to start working. It's quick to iterate your thoughts on paper, and we know this. You know, you can just bust out a piece of typing paper and start sketching, and you can actually iterate through lots and lots of ideas and thoughts very quickly on paper, where to do so in an electronic tool or a computer tends to be a little bit more convoluted. You're obviously going through keyboard and mouse. You know, you're using a bunch of different steps. So iteration is faster on paper for a lot of people. Mistakes are easier to spot, so you can, you know, go through and you can draw stuff, and then you're actually spotting mistakes as you draw them that you hadn't thought about before. So again, you know, iteration is based on making mistakes quickly and learning from them. it's easier to visualize being there. That's a key component, is as you draw, you're using your imagination. As you use your imagination, you're able to see what you're thinking. And so for a lot of designers, drawing on paper first allows them to be transported into the level to see what the player would see. It builds confidence in your vision, so maybe you have an idea, and maybe you don't know if it's good. If you draw it on paper, a lot of people allow themselves to gain the confidence that, yes, this is going to work, and that's an important aspect. And finally, it's the quickest, easiest way, as far as I'm concerned, to fail, certainly the cheapest. Pixar and Dyson are two different companies. The first makes animated movies, the second makes vacuum cleaners and hand dryers. And they both have a mandate that you should fail early, fail often. That's the key to their success. And I think that that's awesome, because basically what you want to do is make all of your mistakes early in the process when they're cheap and easy to fix, as opposed to later in the process where they're expensive, require a lot of resources to fix, or maybe you simply just need to cut them. There's no time to fix them. So working on paper allows for quick, easy failure at the beginning of the project. And I'm not talking about drawing as we might talk about drawing in terms of fine art. Very few game designers, level designers are admitted, artists. There's certainly no aspirations to fine art for a lot of level designers. What we're really talking about is pictures, just the ability to visualize and abstract something in a simple visual form. It's the breaking down of the extremely complicated nature of what we do as designers into something as inherent as just thinking. And it's the combination of things, small chunks that eventually become greater than the sum of their parts. This is something that predates speech or the written word. This is visualization. We visualize. So this is one of Frank Gehry's doodles. He's an award-winning architect, and this is how he starts his buildings, his structures. I mean, this is basically a squiggle. I mean, this is incoherent to anyone but him. Maybe incoherent to him as well. But it's doodling that sets something amazing in motion. To be able to go from that little doodle to create something like the Experience Music Project in Seattle actually shows the power of drawing as a creative accelerant. And people may argue whether the EMP is actually beautiful, but you can see the beginning and the end of that sequence, and it's quite a remarkable sequence. So how does this tie into level design specifically? This is a diagram I came up with for a book I wrote on the subject many years ago, and essentially the function of level design I see is being kind of a funnel to take things that other specialists make and to combine them and actually form the game. A level artist may make assets, a programmer may make a system, the designers are coming up with the rules of the game, but it's up to the level designer to basically take all these things, put them together in a way that actually works and runs and allows the player to have an experience, or a good experience. So that's the function, but then I was thinking, well, what's the raison d'etre of the level designer? What combination of skills makes a good level designer a level designer as opposed to a programmer or a game designer, an artist or a producer, scriptwriter, anything like that? There's three pillars, I think, that came out of that. There's problem solving, there's communication, and there's art. And what's interesting to me is that these three pillars represent, I think, the stages that good levels are built. If there are level designers or artists among you in the crowd, usually what happens is at first you have problem solving where there's an idea and you start to make it work and you get to a feasible level concept. There's communication where it used to be a level designer would just go off and make a level by him or herself. Now a level designer needs to communicate with all the specialists on his team to create something viable. And then art is where the polish and the life happens. The third phase where you go from what we call a white box or a functioning level to a level that we would ship and try and sell. But let's ignore that. Let's talk about what ties these three pillars together, and that is what is called visual literacy. And I'll give some examples from my own personal work just to kind of show how I use visual literacy. And then how it sort of applies to my work as a level designer. So, like I talked about before, level designers tend to be given things, and then they are responsible for forming them into something cohesive and experience. So they're given doctrines, or they're given systems, or they're given controls and scripts. They're given story points. And it's an immensely difficult task, not to mention daunting, to be responsible for combining these things in a meaningful way. And the meaningful way is what makes the game actually enjoyable. And the way to start this process is to work from the abstract down to the detailed level. Basically, you start to doodle, right? Look at Frank. Doodling is possibly the most constructive thing a designer can do. And actually, I would go as far as to say that this isn't just level design. I think doodling is the most constructive thing any designer could do in any field. So Sony Brown, who's a noted proponent of doodling, gave a TED Talk on the subject a while ago, and you can see it on YouTube. I think it's her only TED Talk. But she was unhappy with all of the negative definitions of doodling, and so she wanted to define it herself. So she came up with this. Doodling is to make spontaneous marks to help yourself think, which is brilliant, succinct and brilliant. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. So how then does doodling help us in our core pillars? This is a quote by Dan Rome. He's the author of The Back of the Napkin, which is a great book on visual literacy. And I think this sums it up. I won't read it out loud, but you know, drawing out pieces of your problem and using drawing to solve those. So when it comes to problem solving in a visual way, I approach every task, level design, game design. Even if I'm setting up a team, I tend to break it down into components. For level design specifically, I have 5 main tasks I realized. I do thought points, I do bubble diagrams, thumbnails, flow sketches, and layouts. And I do all of that before I actually go into an editor to start building anything for real. So thought points are just the first marks on paper I make. Generally, it's just an unfiltered attempt to put down all of my initial thoughts on paper. But I'll give you an example of a situation where I had to use a lot of thought points. I was doing work on a game called Monday Night Combat. I was doing some contract work, and they wanted to make a level that was based on the kind of level from another genre of game, a multiplayer online battle arena game. There's a game called Dota, which I know some of you in the audience are probably familiar with. Essentially, it's very simple. It's a square. There's a base in every corner. In each corner, there's 2 paths on each side, one through the middle, that AI units basically use to move towards each other and attack each other's base, and the players are free to roam around the rest of the map as well. I don't really play those games, so I had to sit down, I had to watch videos, I had to read a lot of websites, play those games, kind of work out what exactly it was that I needed to do here. So the first task in problem solving is simply absorbing the problem, understanding what your problem is. My problem was I needed to understand what this map was, and I needed to know how to translate that to the game that I was making the new map for. So I'm dividing the problem into bits, and I'm trying to conquer them and assemble all of those little solutions into a greater solution. So I started writing. I just wrote down everything I could think of. I wrote down what I liked, what I didn't like, what appealed to me, what didn't appeal to me, what I thought would work. I made some little diagrams in terms of like how the layout works on an abstract level, like is there like a center hotspot, or there's sanctuary zones. So writing down and like quickly sketching ideas in a form that will allow me to understand what I'm thinking later when I'm kind of like stuck or wondering where was I going with this is actually a pretty crucial first step for me. The next stage is getting to grips with the problems or ideas that I've jotted down as a group of connected dependencies. It's what we call a bubble diagram. This is a diagram from a Harry Potter game I was designing. And so what I've got here is basically I've taken a lot of the ideas from my thought points, and I've started to kind of stick them in boxes and connect those boxes to make a very abstract representation of what the level will look like. What are the experiences? What order will the player, encounter them? What ideas do I want to bring from my thought point list into the level itself? The little severed eyeball is not actually from Harry Potter, but it is indicative of something that I will do in the margins of my work as a way to unstick my mind, basically. So, if I'm stuck, then I'll start to like subdoodle in the margins, and that will help me sort of relieve the pressure of having to make a decision, and then I can move on. So I just happen to like eyeballs, sorry. And those bubble diagrams are great. Like you can really tackle any problem as a bubble diagram. A level, a game, your team setup, the schedule. Bubble diagrams are a way to abstract, like a connectivity pattern. With the bubble diagram for the Harry Potter level done, I moved to thumbnail sketches. So I've got the bubble diagram, I've got my little cells, and I'm like, okay, I'll take a clean sheet of paper and I'll take each one of those boxes, and I begin to actually sketch out in more detail what that encounter or puzzle or interaction or what those ideas are and how they work. Sometimes I use little isometric drawings. I'm using a lot of notes and call outs here to be able to remind myself of what it is I'm thinking. And that's just to make sense for myself. No one's going to read these except me, so it only has to make sense to me right now. And these thumbnails allow me to quickly evaluate the strength of my ideas. I can quickly say, that's going to work, that's not going to work. That might work for another level. Maybe I'll save that one and use it later. So on the left of those thumbnails I just showed you, those are good examples of a single player thumbnail sheet. There's lots of details. I've gone in, I've actually kind of done, a lot of notes on where the player is going to be and how they'll interact and what they're interacting with. On the right side are some thumbnails I've done of that Monday Night Combat map I told you about, the multiplayer game, and you can see the difference. The left side, the single player game, is all about interaction, about what the player is doing and how the environment is reacting to the player. On the right side, there's almost no call-outs, there's no details. And what I'm doing there is I'm basically, in a multiplayer game, it's all about the environment and the environment's impact on the player, how the players can see each other, how they flow through the environment, the relation of actual environmental things to each other. So thumbnail, just to give you an idea of the fact that the thumbnail sketches don't have a uniform look. It's basically whatever the game you're working on will define what you need at this stage. Sorry, take a drink. So with enough thumbnails, I have basically all of these ideas written down on sheets. I'm ready to go forward to the next phase, which is the flow model. And I've got my encounters, my locations, my visual highlights, and I need to put everything together in context, both physically and in terms of gameplay. What is the gameplay experience I'm going for? And this is where I can actually, when I talked earlier about being transported, I can actually feel myself in the level. I can see the level from the point of view of a player, boots on the ground, moving around. I can understand critical elements like how big the level is, how complex it's going to be, the pacing, the rhythm, all those things that are important in terms of where is the level going to be in the game. Flow is less about the ideas themselves, which I've already covered in the thumbnails, and it's more about how these ideas are connected in relation to each other to determine the player's experience. This is equivalent, I would say, to the first draft of a movie script, right? You know it's going to change, but it basically has the cohesive story and gameplay. So when the level clicks, and there's a physical click in your brain where you say, okay, this is good, this is what I want to ship. And you have a good vision of the level and you believe it's going to work, then what I'll do is I'll take one last page and I'll begin to detail out what I'm seeing. This is what I call the layout, the final layout. So I use call-outs here and notes to kind of clarify or remember issues and ideas that I'm coming up with, and I'm indicating sort of things like depth, height, width, or I'm noting details in here. In this particular instance, because it's a multiplayer map, there's less interactions, but I'm noting where things are, where the player spawners are, where do the AI move. I have little path markers. The spiky black objects are where AI units would basically encounter each other and fight. So this is, the final paper element before I go to my computer and I begin to work digitally. For a single player map, this is one I did for a SOCOM title a long time ago. It's a tactical shooter, so it's a single player tactical shooter in which there are a lot of rooms to clear and there are variable heights. I've used a Sharpie to block out negative space so I can understand what parts of the level of the environment are traversable and what's off limits. In the top left, I've even gone so far as to draw the floor plans of buildings. So this is much more complex than the one I did for the Monday Night Combat level I just showed. Even more complicated is this level from a game called Splinter Cell. And this is one of the levels I did. And the gameplay was a stealth game. It's a stealth game which requires a lot of interactivity and things in the level. I went so far as to draw in the actual shadows that I wanted that are being cast by lights. And it got so dense that I realized this is incomprehensible to everyone who might look at it except for me, maybe even me as well. And so what I did is I took it into Photoshop and I translated it into a much cleaner version with a much more pleasing contrast ratio and proper fonts. And so I was in the position of not necessarily building this level myself, but handing it to an artist and having them be able to read what I wanted them to do. So I needed to make sure my instructions were clear. And that communication segues into the second pillar, right, which is communication. One of the inherent responsibilities in any design role, not least of that designing levels, is communication. Preparing your vision in a manner where others are capable of helping to build it. And I mean, architects or car designers or fashion designers, every design path generally teaches its students to do this, but I found that level designers often are not taught how to communicate properly. Visual communication, visual fluency is critical here. Realistically, game design is a world where you will write a lot of documentation and no one will read it. Because no one wants to. I mean, no one wants to read, 50-page design documents. So your ability to communicate in pictures, I think, will often determine your effectiveness, and it's certainly been true for my career. My ability as an artist has helped me greatly as a designer. So communication. This is another Dan Rome quote. I think this is the last quote, I'm sorry. It's very dense, but the meat of this quote is basically visual thinking is developing ideas quickly and intuitively and then sharing those ideas with other people in a way that they get. That is the critical part, that they have to get what you're saying and not get something else out of it. One of my favorite videos on the web other than TED Talks are these RSA animate videos. I don't know if you guys have seen them, they're fantastic. They take lectures, really great lectures, and sometimes very lofty subjects, and what happens is they strip out the video component, they use the audio, and they have a cartoonist essentially drawing in real time as you listen to the lecture. And this helps listeners not only understand but retain the information that's being presented. This falls into dual coding theory, developed by a Canadian scientist, cognitive scientist of the name Pavio. And dual coding theory indicates that humans have a better absorption and a better recall of written or spoken information when there's a strong corresponding visual. So when you're simultaneously engaging multiple parts of your audience's brain, they will retain what you're saying better and possibly understand what you're saying better too. So I'll give you an example of how powerful a tool drawing can be. This is I'll show you what a 10-minute sketch did for me, I guess, and how that one sketch of a level allowed an entire game to be born around it. When I was first talking about making my current game, which is called Moonbreakers, which is a fly around and shoot stuff in space game, I just sat down with a pen and paper and I drew out the experience I wanted. I didn't start writing anything. I started to draw because in my mind's eye I had that vision of how it would look. Now this is what it looks like in game. You're behind your ship and there's everything out there, but the sketch I did is this. This is a result of about 20 minutes of straight doodling. And as new people came onto the team, I showed them this picture as a means to communicate what the game was, as opposed to showing them, giving them some design document. And they were clearly able to see what the goals were here and what the vision was in seconds. I mean, I could give them a picture and they'd say, "Oh, I get it. That's great." And they could understand what was fun about the game immediately. I've got, little carriers and fighters and bombers, and the fighters are shooting the bombers. I mean, it's pretty complex, but you can just take a look and say, "I understand." Whereas if they'd read my documentation, they may understand what I was trying to go for, but they may have come away with a different idea of what I wanted to do versus what they read. So that may not work for every game. Obviously, my game is simple enough that I can encapsulate it in one 20-minute sketch. If you're working on a commercial game with huge levels and it gets very complicated, it is easy to break down the level or components of the game into individual little sketches and put them in a linear sequence. Linear art is just a fancy way of saying comics. And then the storyboarding methodology has been used in animation and film forever. But this is an undeniable way of presenting information to people in an expedient way and allowing them to get it very quickly. This is why movies, scripts are turned into storyboards, because you can basically put this up like Pixar would against a room full of people. They can instantly look at it, see if it works for them. And then of course, if these pictures are movable, if these are on Post-its, say, you can actually rearrange things. So you can take a complex scene just like you can take a complex level and bust it down into simple sketches to allow people to understand the experience that you're going for. It's a highly effective communication tool. As a level designer, your role as a communicator is essential to getting things made. We've talked about this. You don't just need to pitch your idea, but you need to translate your level's essential needs, potential problems, and ultimately get everyone behind your vision. You actually need to sell your vision, not just tell people this is what I want to do, because you want people to believe in your vision as well. And vision is the operative word here, right? When you visually demonstrate your level to the whole room, everyone in that room can begin to analyze the plans based on their own concerns, right? Programmers can say, okay, what systems will I need or not need? artists can begin to understand what's the scope and scale, what assets do I need to build for this level, and producers can start working out when to cut it, which is a producer joke. But everyone on the team can assess what you're going for and how it'll impact their own department. I mean, there are some rules. You need to create clear, well-labeled drawings. You can't just go up and do a Frank Gehry because obviously no one's going to understand what you're doing. So you don't have to bring a ruler up there, but you do have to make sure that what you're drawing is clear. And if you need to use text and call-outs, do that. Make sure that your visual communication is actually effective. When in doubt, if you feel like you can't draw, or if you can't draw what needs to be drawn, or it's going to take too long, Google Images is your friend. I mean, you can go out there, and if your level is based on an oil rig, or you have a certain architectural style, or you want a certain kind of weather effect, you can go to Google Images, and I guarantee you'll find 50,000 examples of what you want built. Find those, put them in a folder, present them to people, and there's your visual communication. Give them a visual about what you want. Don't just sit there and sort of explain it with wild gestures. Because I guarantee you'll get something very different in the end. And then again, understanding the needs and concerns of others. Visual communication isn't really just about drawing stuff in pictures. It is about presenting things to people, understanding what it is that they need to see and their needs and concerns, so you can target that and those needs with visual communication. One of the most effective ways I found to do this is drawing as you talk and as you think. In a meeting room, your best friend is often the whiteboard as a designer. Quite often you can even just unstick a meeting that's kind of stuck and has no resolution by jumping up to the whiteboard, beginning to draw things out. In a meeting that's been bogged down, you can apply visual literacy to an issue at hand. And real-time problem solving works just as effectively with mundane problems as it does with specific level design. For new designers, I always tell guys who are looking to get in the industry, learn to do this. Learn to draw while you think, learn to draw while you speak, because in an interview, I'm going to make you get up there in a whiteboard and basically explain what you're saying visually. And extra brownie points for people who actually jump up and do it themselves. So, interview candidates, I think, showing that you're a good visual communicator as a designer is super important. When there's no whiteboard, I like to bring giant Post-its. These are my favorite things ever. I have some friends here who've worked with me, and they probably have seen my giant Post-its, may even have a few still. These are an essential tool for every level designer. You can go over to Staples and buy some, but giant Post-its are just giant Post-its that you stick anywhere and you can write on them, and any room can be turned into a meeting room. It's pretty fantastic. Best of all, you can give these to people after your meeting, so no one can basically say I forgot what we talked about in the meeting, because they have a giant Post-it on their wall with everything you decided at that meeting. So it's a fantastic way to record your visual communication, be able to sort of deal it out to the people who are most interested in having that information later. So the last pillar I want to talk about is art. The debate on games as art is still raging, right? This is something that everyone talks about, but actually that's irrelevant for me, because as a level designer, you're an artist because of the skills you use every day. Even regular designers, but level designers specifically, because you are using things like composition. You are creating imagery and vistas. You're using proportion and balance when building your environment, your level. You're using cultural symbolism all the time. And fundamentally, at the deepest roots of art, in terms of my opinion, you are doing emotional engineering through sensory stimuli. This is what all artists do. So games may not be art, but you are an artist because of the things that you do to make levels. So my comparison here, in terms of the use of drawing and sketching in art and connected to level design, is to go back to the old masters. Some of the finest, most realistic, paintings I would consider in the realism movement. The old masters had a lot of different techniques to make their paintings, but there was kind of a generality here. There's 3 stages I'll summarize. The inventing or the drawing was done on paper to create the structure of the piece, as well as to anchor the vision of what the final painting would be. It's just structure, it's just shapes, it's a concept. It's there to make sure that the artist is about to embark on a piece that he'll be happy with at the end, or his client would be, or patron. The drawing was then applied to wood or canvas, and then a painting layer called the underpainting was applied. And this was to create form and light and shadow and depth and dimension. It's all about creating a foundation for the final painting. That layer of paint probably wouldn't be visible to the end user, but it's essential because the third phase, the overpainting, is where the final paints were applied to the underpainting, and these are the paints that are visible to the viewer. This is where the painting comes to life. This is where the details added, the leaves and the trees and the smoke and the stones and the highlights and lowlights, the depth and the color. So now when you see an old master in a gallery, you won't see the underpainting and the drawing, but you are looking at them in the finished work. This is why, to me, level design requires that same discipline, that sense of building a foundation and applying work and effort to those parts at the beginning as opposed to jumping right to the end. If you jump right to the end and you just start painting on canvas, my good friend Rob Ross, whose face is on my t-shirt, has a painting technique called alla prima, where basically you just mix on canvas and you just jump and you paint on a canvas. And no offense to Bob, but I would not call his paintings fine art. The old master technique is to build something that transcends time, that makes paintings that are essentially as close to a photograph as you'd be able to find in art, I think. So, to give an example from my own work, and a warning against making too many shooting games, actually, probably, and what it'll do to your mental skills. I'll use a charcoal sketch often before I do a painting, and this is one of my own paintings. This isn't what would technically be called a drawing in the old master technique because I'm not painting on top of it, but what it does allow me to do is understand what it is that I'm trying to do. A drawing phase allows you to see the finished form and the structure. I can understand my mistakes, I can correct for them, and I can make sure that very quickly I have an image, a composition that makes me happy, maybe makes other people uncomfortable, but, and I can go forward to the painting stage. The takeaway here is that building a good foundation is the key to success. I mean, that's basically truth for everything in life, but very specifically, the foundation needs to be there, and you need to be able to build that foundation to have success in your later work, I think. So level design, can and does benefit from a similarly layered, carefully applied attention to the process. In level design, we have our paper layouts, right? All the work that I just showed you guys, that's the equivalent to the drawing. The underpainting is equivalent to what we, in the level design business, would call a white box, a functioning level, basically the geometry, the spaces fleshed out, the ability to say, yes, this level is going to be okay. It plays well, but it is not finished. And then the overpainting is the final level polish. That's where everything comes to pass. That's where the final art treatments are done, and the audio is laid in, and the lighting, and you've tuned the enemies to behave just right. The gameplay is there, and that's what the player sees. The player doesn't see the white box. He doesn't see your drawings, but all of the work that you did is present in the final result of that level in the shipping game. So the takeaway here is to remember that even if what you make isn't considered art, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't approach it in the way that artists approach their craft, right? Don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't be considered an artist. So, when I was doing this talk, I realized I was pontificating a lot. And I wanted to leave with some sage practical advice. So, drawing and sketching, to me, is so much easier when you find your pen. I have this theory that, like wands in Harry Potter, that there is a pen out there for everybody, right? Like, you just have to find it. And there is no store where you can go where a sinister old man will help you find your pen, but you can go to Staples and you can buy a bunch and work out what works for you. All pens have pros and cons. There's no good or bad pen. I was talking to Decker about this earlier, but he uses a ballpoint pen, which are great. You can get lots of halftone shading, but occasionally they'll just blob ink all over your work, and that's no fun. You have to be okay with that. Technical pens have variable line weight, but are very fragile. Their nibs are very thin. Roller balls have a nice opacity and consistent line weight, but they tend to be pricier than disposable Bic pens. There's markers. They're chunky and bold. There's crayons, there's pencils. There are so many utensils for you to visually create. You just have to find which one will allow you to unleash your artist inside. So I use a Uniball Vision, and these are the best pens in the universe. I kid you not. I mean, I've used a lot of pens, and these things, they're practically indestructible. The ink lasts forever. They're waterproof. They have great tone. They don't bleed very much. And I know a lot of people I run into, will spot each other using Uniballs. Like, oh man, you use those too. But seriously, I go try Uniball Vision and see if you don't like it. I'd be very surprised if you don't. It may not be your pen, but you'll be happy with your purchase. I also carry a stainless steel Sharpie, which are very cool. You can buy them at Amazon or again Staples. I'm doing a lot of promotional work for Staples today. These are about like $8. They're awesome. They're stainless steel, so the cap fits tighter. If you've ever had the cap come off your Sharpie in your bag, you'll know what a mess that can make. They feel better. They have a tougher weight. They're easier to hold, and because they're stainless steel, you'll know if someone steals it because no one else uses a stainless steel Sharpie but you. And then I have a ring-bound sketch pad. I basically use a ring-bound sketch pad because it lies flat, and when drawing is great, but then when you want to transfer your drawing to the digital realm, you have two options. You can take a picture of it, or you can scan it. And there's nothing more frustrating than trying to scan something in a book-bound sketch pad and trying to jam it flat. So I like ring-bound sketch pads that go flat, and it's good for tables like these. And these are just the 3 things I carry wherever I go. They're in my bag right now. Because I never know when I'm going to have an idea. When I have an idea, I want to get it down visually. So to coin a phrase, or maybe to borrow a phrase from a certain play, always be drawing is my motto. And I tell this to level designers, and so I think this works for everybody. I think everyone should draw because it's fun. But for level designers and for designers in any industry, it will make you a better designer because of what you are. You're a problem solver, you're a communicator, and you're an artist, and drawing helps in all 3 of those pillars. And I think ultimately drawing will help you be a better visionary. Maybe not a better artist, but a better visionary. You should draw when you think, you should draw when you talk, and you should draw when you listen. People may think that that's rude, but drawing in all of those aspects, I think, will help improve your design skills and make you a much more sellable designer when it comes to building your career in the industry. That's it. Thanks. So here's my email. If any of you guys don't actually know me, and there may be a few people in this room who don't know me, you can always get a hold of me at this email here, and I'm happy to talk stuff. I may not reply super quick, but yeah, that's my talk. So thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah.
So it would be at this point I would do like a Q&A, and 32,000 student game designers would step up to a mic and pretty much ask me, what it was like to work on Splinter Cell, or what my favorite game is. But I mean, if you guys have questions, I can go down to this table and answer them too. I don't need to do this at the mic, but yeah, thanks for coming out on Easter.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Another round of applause for Ed today.